Okay, we have a quorum. So I'm gonna, Chris, if you're ready. Okay, I'm gonna call the meeting. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 5:30. And we have Chris as a minute taker. And before we get started tonight, I just want to kind of set the context for this special meeting because it wasn't one we planned on. So about a week ago, I began seeing a need to have this special meeting to discuss our board process and the timeline. I began working with Patrick and consulted with the other committee chairs about my concerns. And as the week unfolded, I received word from board counsel of a need to communicate information to the board. This information resulted in an additional agenda item for the meeting, the executive session. The meeting tonight is divided accordingly. We expect we'll need about an hour and a half for the executive session with our council, followed by a discussion action item regarding the timeline. I appreciate everybody's willingness to have an additional meeting tonight on such short notice. The second item on our agenda is an action item to determine the timeline for the decision making. And as your chair, it's my responsibility to ensure the integrity of the board process. I know you're all aware of the tremendous amount of work that has gone into getting us where we are today, and these last few weeks have been especially unsettling to me. I have real concerns about our ability to fully understand our responsibility as a board and to make a strong group decision. I don't think we can have a deep discussion as a group about all of this in just 2 meetings. That is why I added this item to the agenda tonight. I'm coming to you tonight to recommend that in the interest of working together as a group and continuing to really understand the decision in front of us and to allow us time to further study what we are faced with, that we take action tonight that gives us the time we need. I'm asking that we commit to further study. I'm asking you not to take action this month to consider options on this town meeting day. And I recognize that this may result in a vote later in this year or even town meeting day next year. I'm not asking you to pause our work. I'm asking you to take more time to study everything and make a well thought out decision. I think we all understand that this is not a decision that we can put off indefinitely. We need a plan if our district is going to move to have a future. And I am well aware that what I'm recommending could cause some financial hardship to the district. But I do believe if we make a decision based on our work together in an in-depth study, we will demonstrate ourselves as true trustees of our school. So tonight, after that action item, then we have space for public comment at the end of the meeting. So right now, we are in need of an executive session under Title I, VSA 15, Section 313A1F. That category requires a determination, a motion that determines the disadvantage to the district to having this conversation in public session. Kevin?
So this is Kevin. I move that we make as a board the specific finding that the premature release of anticipated confidential attorney-client communications with our new attorneys, William Mube and Andrew Snow, for the purpose of his providing our board with professional legal services, would clearly place our board at a substantial disadvantage.
Okay, is there a second?
This is Liz Sayre. I second.
Thank you, Liz. Any discussion? Caleb? Oh, you know what? I did have a process to go through to check with people. So I'm just going to go run down my list and like we did last time. Annie, do you have any comments?
Nope.
Okay. And now my list is downstairs, so I'm going to go.
It's me, Dawn.
Okay.
Nope.
All right,
Have it
Sarah.
memorized. Liz comes next.
All right, Liz.
No, thank you.
And who went after Liz?
Andrew.
Andrew. Andrew's there. No, Andrew, do you know who went after you?
Andrew, for what it's worth, we can't hear you. At least I can't hear you.
Yeah,
The person I saw give an answer was a person that has E. Sayer in front of their E.
oh, okay, thank you. All right, so let's see, Caleb, I'll go to you. Sorry,
That's fine. Thanks. And just thanks for fitting this meeting in. I agree. It's a good one to have here. So I don't support going to executive session at this time. I'd like to hear this in public. The statute that was quoted there, my issue with this is that I believe contemplates a more adversarial situation, maybe something where there's bargaining and another union involved. We don't have an adversary here. I don't think we can be put at a disadvantage to our voters and our taxpayers. I think that my understanding is this is going to be answering the question that was asked at the December 22nd meeting, which was, what is the legal advice for whether the proposal is in accordance with our founding articles? And to the extent that's what we're going to hear, I want to hear it in public. One, because I think it's appropriate, because the public is not our adversary, and so we cannot be at a disadvantage to them. And number two, because if we do it under executive session, we can't talk about what we hear. And what we hear is really important. So maybe we can define it really, really narrowly. And that way, if we're in there, we have some guardrails, we can come out. But as the motion is currently formulated, I have to vote no on it. And thank you.
okay. Let's see.
I think I might have been next,
Okay, Steve.
and I'm just going to echo what Caleb just said.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right. Who went after Steve? I've lost people, just a minute. Sarah McLean, do you want to go?
Yeah, I would also like to echo Caleb's point and then just ask, maybe the attorneys can help us think through who the disadvantage is to. Who is disadvantaged with us staying in open session?
Do any other board members want to comment? Kevin?
I would just like to remind the rest of the board that Lincoln has hired a attorney and has communicated with us with a position. So I don't know if that, I'm not so sure that we are not at a position where, as we deliberate, it could be non-advantageous to us given that situation.
I'm going to look to Dave and then.
I apologize. I had to leave a state association school boards meeting to join this one, and I could not get two machines working to get two different meetings up. So I've left them and I'm late here and I apologize. So maybe this question's already been answered, but my question is, in order to go into executive session, we need to identify specifically who this might harm if this was not done in open session. And has that been asked and answered?
Yeah, we're just discussing right now.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob?
Yeah, I also third or fourth what Caleb stated. I actually think it does the opposite. Going into an executive session, I would say puts us in a disadvantage in the sense that whatever I would assume goes forward when we think long term, we go to our communities every year for a vote up or down on a budget. If we go to them with a vote up or down on a bond or a vote up or down on school closure, putting this under a veil, I think, puts us at a disadvantage to have favorable outcomes down the road.
Okay, and Kristen Blanchett, we haven't heard from. Kristen? Okay, I'm not seeing her there. Have I missed anyone? Board members? Krista, there you are.
Hi. Yeah, I can see where we would be at a disadvantage if we are responding to a legal challenge or a legal inquiry. I don't know what the right word is. And in some ways we are. But being at a disadvantage assumes that we would be following that through to potentially going to court to argue for our position. And I don't want us to be there yet. And I think the timing of this meeting is unfortunate because it's my hope that we can find a way to continue our conversations as a board and revisit our timing in a way that might negate the need for legal action or posturing to begin with. I think I understand why it's out there, why we've gotten into this adversarial situation. And I think a lot of it has to do with our timeline. There's the timeline as it is right now has us as a board potentially making a decision on January 20th. I think if we had the opportunity to dialogue about that timeline and what we might want to do, that might take us off the adversarial train. And so I wish that we weren't yet hearing from our attorney, because I think we could have some really good conversations that would get us to more of a productive dialogue and communication as a board and with our community. So I'm not super comfortable with going into executive session at this time because I don't really want us to be furthering that adversarial posturing.
Has everybody had a chance to speak once? Board members? Yeah. All right, Caleb, I see your hand up.
Thanks. Thanks for letting me speak again. I'll be quick. I just want to clarify something. There's not an adversarial thing happening here. We have a proposal in front of us. We're taking the necessary steps to look into it. We're asking the necessary questions. The question asked on the 22nd that I assume council is going to talk to us tonight is one of those questions. We should hear from council tonight. But we should do it in public, I think. And the other point that I want to make is that this is the board of directors. No disrespect to Patrick whatsoever, but it is not the board of followers, okay? We are going to choose the proposal. We are going to take responsibility for the new direction. Patrick has a proposal and we are vetting it. So we have not rejected it. We have not put it forward. The communities that are asking questions are not adversarial to this board. They may be adversarial to elements of the process that has been suggested. And I think that's part of the vetting. But this board does not have a position on this proposal. Just want to emphasize that.
Sarah McLean, you had your hand up, I think.
I did, and I just kind of, again, wanted to echo that. I don't see this as adversarial. I see that we're still in the information gathering phase of this proposal. The board hasn't had a chance to devote or commit much time to discuss this proposal since it was presented on the 7th of December. And one of the questions that's been asked of the board through countless correspondence via email and mostly email, I guess, and calls that I'm sure many of us are getting is how does it align with our articles of agreement that we voted on? And as much as we've tried to, we haven't actually had a chance to talk through it, but in our discussion on the 22nd, it seemed that the course forward was to get legal counsel to help us digest what the standing of the proposal is according to our articles of agreement. So that seems to be just, I'm looking at this as information gathering to going forward. Yeah.
Bill?
Yes, somebody asked for the lawyer to comment on this and to give you a sense that just because you accept legal input and ask for confidential communications does not mean you're adversarial. The law, and particularly interpreting contracts or interpreting articles, is not necessarily black and white. And I can tell you, and I'm happy to say it right here, that your articles are not black and white, and there's ambiguity in it. And the only way that you are ever going to get a resolution to some of the ambiguities is to have some court decide it, because whatever I say or whatever the lawyer for Lincoln has submitted a memorandum about the particular issue is just a lawyer's opinion. So part of what normally happens in situations like this is school boards get input from lawyers that describe, well, it could go this way, it could go this way. You could consider this, you could consider this. I can answer questions. I am more than prepared to give whatever explanations people want to have in public. But to be able to ask a lawyer who is being hired to provide confidential communications to a board on a whole bunch of ambiguous and confusing situations and deal with it is a situation that I'm not used to ever dealing with. Confidential communications are given to our clients, and our clients are allowed to use that information in any way in which they want to do it. Executive sessions generally have the requirement that everybody agree to the confidentiality of what's there. But everybody can agree, or you could even have a vote, however you wanted to do it, to say, look, we want to waive that and go out and have you explain it in open session. So there are all kinds of options, but asking to have me answer whatever questions you might want to have without ever being able to voice my own concerns or reservations about how something might go or might not go. I can give you percentages. I think this has a 60% chance of winning or an 80% chance of winning. And as I tell clients, rarely have I ever told anybody anything in the law is absolutely certain. And based upon the issues that I've already seen, I can tell you, I can't tell you anything is absolutely certain. There's a few things that are certain and clear when reading the statute and your articles and what's out there. But again, I would encourage you to go into executive session. This is very typical, very common, not ever viewed as an improper use of going into executive session, the open meeting law, to be able to get this kind of advice. And then you can decide what you want to do after you're able to pick my brains. And because I am new, your prior lawyers who had been involved have been conflicted out of this matter because of Lincoln. You have invested incredible amounts of time. I've been given almost 1,400 pages of emails and notes. I've been given notebooks full of additional material to be able to review in order to try to answer your questions, because the town of Lincoln has essentially conflicted out your prior attorneys who had been involved with you doing and going through the entire process, which would have the best of the information. So you already have a conflict that has existed and occurred. What you want to do with it is there. I think you should listen to it and then decide as a group what you want to do. And I'd be happy to provide whatever information and play what role I think I can reasonably play under the circumstances.
Dave, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My problem is that what I've experienced, and I'm a new member to the board since March. So some of this went on before I joined the board. Basically, what I've experienced is a dialogue between the superintendent and the board. We have not heard from any outside experts or testimony that I'm accustomed to when trying to create the right policy and the right path. Is you hear from both sides or all 6 sides, and you take testimony and the board hears all that, and it's all done in public. So this, what I consider this overuse of executive session in order to conduct business behind closed doors, I have trouble with that. And I have trouble with the fact that we have not had education experts from elsewhere. We actually have an expert in our district who's gone around the world helping school districts figure out what to do. We didn't ask him to come in and give us his thoughts regarding our own school district. And so that's what concerns me the most, is that we have not heard from enough angles as to how we deal with this incredibly difficult financial and educational process that we need to go through to help our children and our communities move forward. And just a dialogue between the superintendent and the board seems to me completely inadequate and inefficient. To have more and more of it done behind closed doors very much concerns me.
Kevin. Kevin, you're muted.
Thank you. I would just go back to Mr. Mube's comment about the fact that if he starts speculating, or if we start getting an understanding of speculation as to the nuances of what we may be considering, that particularly since we do have an entity, a town, that's ready to, that is not ready, is in the process of starting a litigation, that we need to really consider his opinions, not the facts. I get the facts or the different options in public, but his opinions as to probability are very, should be very close to the chest so that we can make decisions on what we want to do with the options.
Caleb.
Well, I just hearing from Mr. Mube, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, a little bit there. That was a little bit more of an expansive answer than I think we needed for this motion. But I think it speaks to the fact that we're getting ready to potentially have a pretty meandering conversation in executive session. I don't think we have some laundry list of questions for council tonight. I think we asked a specific question on 1222, and that's what we should be getting a report of. We should be getting go through the proposal or the parts of it and say, is it in accord with our articles? That's really the question that I would hope the council is prepared to answer, and we're prepared to hear. We should not be going into an executive session, certainly, to just sort of game out a bunch of different situations. That's not what it's for. In my experience, I don't think that'd be right. Also, I do want to point out that Lincoln's not somehow alone here. Starksboro also had a very, well-reasoned opinion that came in a couple obviously lawyers disagree, but and I don't consider the Stark proposition to be adversarial at all. They're not up or down whatsoever on this proposal. They're just saying that process-wise, they think it, needs a town vote. I don't want to get into that, but we've got to narrowly define it. We've got to really tightly define it if we're going to go into this session. And since it doesn't sound like we're prepared to, I really hope we just stay out of it.
So I see Kristen's joined us and she hasn't had a chance to speak. So I'm going to let Kristen speak now because she hasn't had a chance at this point. Kristen, I think you're muted.
Sorry. I apologize. I was at work and I just was able to hop on. I was kind of on, but not really. I was finishing up a meeting. So I apologize for that. So I haven't really heard anything that people have said. So at this point, so the discussion is, should we go into executive session or not? And so since I haven't heard any of the other previous stuff, I can't comment yet, but maybe I can in a little bit. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I saw Liz Sayer had her hand up again.
But I already learned something tonight I wasn't aware of. I wasn't aware that there was a conflict of interest with the previous lawyer. So if there is a way for us to get more feedback and information that you have, I would love some kind of communication about it. Thank you.
Sarah McLean.
Yeah, Liz, I didn't know that the conflict was somehow related to Lincoln. And I don't know, again, I don't know how information is shared and if what's too much and what's not. My understanding of executive session, I looked into it a little bit, but it's to encourage full and frank communications between attorneys and clients, to promote a broader public interest in the observance of law and administration of justice. This is the U.S. Supreme Court had made that statement on the privilege. And I don't see that we need that privilege. I agree with Caleb's point that we had questions that we need answers to, and that we can get those answers in the public sphere.
Okay, we're not all locked in one place, so I have to look for everybody. Okay, then that brings us to the vote, I guess, on the motion. Here it is. So the motion was, Kevin moved that we make as a board, the specific finding that premature release of anticipated confidential attorney-client communications with our new attorney, William Mube, for the purpose of his providing our board with professional legal service would clearly place our board at a substantial disadvantage. So I have my list now, and so we'll go through the list as far as voting. So Krista, are you in favor? Opposed?
No, I'm opposed.
Okay. Sarah McLean.
Opposed.
Okay. Kristen Blanchett.
Since I wasn't here for the rest of the meeting and I don't understand, I'm going to just abstain. I don't really understand what's going on.
Okay. Rob.
Opposed.
Okay. Dave Sharp.
Opposed.
Kevin.
Yes.
Okay. Steve Rooney.
Opposed.
Caleb.
No.
Opposed. Andrew. I didn't hear you, Andrew. Still not hearing you. No? Is that an opposed? Okay. Liz?
I don't feel like I completely, I'm going to abstain from this one.
Okay. Sarah LaPearl?
I'm fine to go into executive session.
Annie?
Opposed.
8 opposed, 2 in favor, and 2 abstentions. So we do not determine premature knowledge would put us at a disadvantage to go into executive session. So I think that stops us from going into executive session at this point. I guess that's it. So I guess thank you, Mr. Mute, for joining us, and Mr. Snow, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen tonight.
That shouldn't prevent us from hearing from our attorney.
Yeah, let's hear from him.
Well, one question would be, are they willing and able to speak in public on what they understand?
You're my client. If you want me to speak, I was told I was coming to give confidential attorney-client privilege material. You're deciding that you want to waive it and make it public. You want to ask me questions, or I would present some of the information I was going to present. I give you what background I can, if that would be helpful, so that people don't think there is anything that's being swept underneath the table or some of the negative things that I've heard.
Well, I'm willing to make a motion that we allow the attorney to speak in public.
I second.
So Steve. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, can I say something?
Sure.
Could I say something now? So I still don't completely understand, since I missed the first half hour. I apologize. I had to work. That's part of the problem of being a school board member. We have other obligations too. So I would just like, and again, I missed all that and I apologize for that. If we could turn the temperature down and be less adversarial in this process, I think that would be great. I think there's a lot of fear about some of the options that people maybe didn't even realize were on the table, things like that. But it just feels like, we haven't even proposed anything yet. Patrick gave us something to bounce off of. We're getting more information, including from our lawyer. And if that information is appropriate to get in public session, I mean, I think he might know if something wasn't, and then whatever. So I'm completely have questions for him and would love to hear some information today before we have our meeting next week. And I just wish the temperature could be turned down. Thank you.
So regarding Steve and Dave's motion to allow our attorneys to speak in public, Annie, do you have any comment?
I am all for it. I think that's exactly what we need to do right now. I think we're all here. We're gathered for this meeting, so let's do it.
Okay. Sarah LaPearl?
No comment.
Okay. Liz Sayer?
I hope that, yes, we can certainly have a conversation in public tonight, but if we, I hope that there's more communication from the lawyer and that we do get everything that, thank you. I guess I'm all set, sorry.
That's all right, thanks. Andrew? Still no sound, Andrew. Sorry. Caleb?
All set, thanks.
Steve?
I'm all set.
Okay. Kevin?
All set.
Dave? You're all set? Okay. Rob?
I agree with Annie.
Okay. Kristen, do you have any other comments around that motion?
Kristen or Krista? Sorry.
Kristen, I've got my list back. So Kristen.
Yeah, I think any information that's appropriate for us to hear in public would be fine to hear tonight.
Okay. Sarah McLean.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. And Krista.
No comment.
Okay. So all those in favor of allowing our William Eub, our attorney, to speak in public, please say aye. And I'll start. Krista,
Aye.
you're in favor. Sarah LaPearl.
Aye. Oh, LaPearl.
I'm sorry, Sarah McLean.
Yeah, aye.
Okay. Kristen Blanchette.
Aye.
Okay. Rob Backlund.
Aye.
Okay. Dave.
Aye.
Kevin.
Yes.
Steve.
Aye.
Caleb.
Aye.
Andrew. Where'd you go, Andrew?
I think he's rebooting.
Okay. All right.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what are we voting on?
Allowing our attorney to speak in public.
Yes.
Okay. Liz.
Aye.
Okay. Sarah LaPearl.
Aye.
Okay. And Annie Denny.
Aye.
Okay. Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze. Okay. Everyone's in favor, so the motion carries. All right. So, Bill, I will turn it over to
I'm
you.
on. Okay. So first of all, I have to tell you that I am essentially within a week of having received a telephone call to ask if I would be willing to serve as an attorney to your unified school district. Was explained to me that there was a conflict because Lincoln had indicated they were going to hire an attorney because they were arguing that things that you were considering doing would constitute a closure of their school, and therefore they were opposed to it. And there was a need to have some sort of legal discussion, research, comment on that particular issue. And would I be willing to do it and be willing to provide information and background, because I do some school work, represent the Rutland City school system, and have been involved in this field for a while. I have received lots of information. I am told that that's the information I am going to get from Steve Stitzel's firm and Dina Atwood, because they also do work for the town of Lincoln and have concluded that this would create a conflict. So they can't be involved in any way in issuing any decisions or opinions relative to your articles, their intent, what it means, etc. So I am your current just claimed expert, if you will, on trying to provide, at least as I see it, some legal opinions. And I always want to say, as I made the comment before, that legal opinions are just that, they're opinions. The only thing that is binding on anything and definitive is when a court gives an order and it's not appealed, or it goes to the Vermont Supreme Court and the Vermont Supreme Court decides it. I have been asked to take a look at the issue of, quote, repurposing versus closure in light of what's in your articles. It appears to me that the position on the brief that I was sent from the attorney for Lincoln takes the position that any change in a K-6 school whether it's in Starksboro or Lincoln or New Haven, would constitute a closure. I disagree with that. I would say that if you converted a school to all administrative offices and there was no more educational activity for any of the students in that town, that would probably be considered a closure. That gives me what I call the two extremes that you take a look at, which are not actually closing the school, boarding it up and saying, we're not going to use it, we're going to turn it back to you. That is the clear closure that is covered in your articles. Anything between that and the requirement that it continue to be a K-6 program and anything other than a K-6 program would constitute a closure. I think that's too extreme, and I think a court would reject that as well. Where educational activity that is done in a repurposing of a school, I certainly think that if you ran a K-3 program in any of the schools, that an argument that it was a closure of the school, I don't think would prevail in a court. And if the town of Lincoln wanted to take it and that was a program that you wanted to adopt for the use of a building that is under your direction and authority, then I think that they would have to go try to say and get an injunction and prevent you from doing it. You would be able to defend it. And what would happen is a court would tell you that it either is a closure or repurposing is appropriate underneath your articles. And when you take a look at the purpose of your unified district, you take a look at the study that was done, you take a look at the language that's in there, having flexibility to manage the schools and use them appropriately is within your jurisdiction. To argue that you had to maintain it just as it was with no changes whatsoever is inconsistent with what all of the study work and all the purposes of Act 46 and all the sample articles out of which your articles came from. So there is no definition of what a closure is. I will say that using language as you're talking about proposals as being like a closure is not helpful to you if you want to try to argue that you're making the best decisions you can and repurposing and continuing educational activity in the schools, I think is authorized, but I would have to take a look at each particular proposal or what you came up with. I'm not clear that you have any fixed plan yet. You're in the process of trying to say, how do we deal with the financial difficulties we have? How do we create good educational opportunities for all the students in the 5 towns? And what is the best configuration that we can use to accomplish that within the framework of what we have? So I can certainly address those kinds of issues or questions. I was also given the difficult question of, well, what happens if changing it from a K-6 is considered a closure and that's not something we do? How do we change it? I would recommend that you do have the ability to try to pass an amendment underneath the statute that controls it. It is a majority vote of all 5 towns that you are going to try to change a definition and try to say that repurposing in some way is there, and how the voters vote on it, it would be in their particular hands. But the ultimate decisions based upon the articles for any decision for the management and operation of the properties that you control and own sits with the board. I was given the question of what about delegating it to the towns? It sits with the board. That is your responsibility. You're elected to make those decisions. And if people don't like it, then they vote you out. So that's kind of the parameters of where I come from. There is also another approach that I would have you consider, if you wanted to make sure that you didn't do anything in violation of your articles. You can always go to court in light of a real justiciable issue, that here is a proposal that we think would be appropriate. We believe that it is repurposing. We don't want to get into a conflict, and dear court, please tell us whether or not this repurposing program that we have developed for this particular school constitutes a closure, or whether it is authorized underneath our articles. And you can get a court to rule on it, and it would then be able to be appealed. Whoever wanted to argue against it would be there. As I see it, it's the voters who have standing. It's still going to be an issue who has the ability to do it. I'm not sure that the individual town itself, a select board, has standing at this point to challenge what's going on. The voters are the people that you represent. You are now your own political subdivision. It is composed of the voters in 5 towns. And whenever an issue comes up that deals with something that's involved with your unified district, you count the total number of votes and you found out which proposition prevailed. And you don't do it town by town, you do it through your entire district. So that's about a quick summary of some of the information that I was asked to provide. And I am more than willing to answer questions that people would like to have me address. I may defer the answer because I have to go look it up and make sure, because this is not something I'm going to say I have been living with for more than a week. All right. And that's a limited amount of time, and I can only do what I can do in a short period of time to help you folks deal with difficult situations in terms of what your options are.
Okay, I'm going to use our rundown list. So I'll get to you. You don't have to raise your hand. I'm going to go down the list so everybody has an equal opportunity. Annie, Denny, do you have any comment or question?
So maybe I misunderstood that, but are you saying that we could have a vote for our whole, not the whole county, I understand, but for our whole 5-town district as opposed to town by town?
Yeah, that's anything that deals with what goes on in your district is for the entire district. The only thing that is by a town has to do with closure. And how you define what closure is, it is not defined. I think that there are disputes and differences in terms of what would constitute a closure. If you wanted to close a building up and not use it anymore and return it, then that would be something that that individual town got to vote on. And the question then becomes, in my mind, what happens if they say no? Are you forced to keep it open, and under what terms and circumstances? And I can't tell you it's clear under the articles what's the consequence of that particular issue is. But generally speaking, all management decisions that affect your district are yours in the board, and the election or an amendment is done by all people in the 5 towns, and however the vote comes out, tallying them all up. For instance, an amendment to your articles would control, it's not done by town.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right.
I'm good, Don.
Okay, thank you. Sarah LaPearl?
I'm fine.
Okay. Liz Sayer?
Hi, thank you for your time and doing as much as you have to get familiar with it in the last week. Another topic that has come up, I guess I don't fully understand with our articles of agreement what the potential would be for an independent school to start up somewhere if they ban and school choice. I don't fully understand how our articles of agreement affect that. And I would like more information on that sometime. Thank you.
Having represented and helped set up an independent school, I can tell you that that is totally independent from the school district. And therefore, if a group of people wanted to set up an independent school, hypothetically, if a school was actually closed, turned back to the town, and the town wanted to sell it for $1, if you wanted to, an independent school that would get set up and established there and run as an independent school and properly licensed, it takes a lot of work, but that certainly has nothing to do with your unified district.
Andrew?
No questions.
Okay. Caleb?
Okay, so yeah, just kind of thinking about the scenario. So in your opinion, it's not closure to repurpose in this proposal, but it would be to close it up or just have it be a big storage facility or something. But in this, it would not be. So what happened, as you probably, I don't know if you've looked closely at the proposal in the past week, but it has a phase 2, which is basically to merge and close the high school and merge with Virgins, or not close the, turn it into a middle school. So making that transition is pretty key to our numbers. So I'm just thinking if in a couple of years we don't make that transition, we might have to cut these innovation sites from our budget. It's just, it's like $3 million and budget's tight. So if we then cut those programs, so now it's really just an empty building. At that point, do we have to ask communities for permission to close their school? Because of course there is an asset that hangs in the balance here. There's a significant asset that the town, but for this closure provision, cannot recapture for $1. So I'm just kind of curious if you would help me think about that.
Well, I will try to address them. I'm not going to address the specific proposals that are out there that you guys are kicking around because they're too uncertain for me to sort of work with.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's only one proposal. It was presented on December 7th. It's the only one that's out there, just to clarify.
Well, to clarify, there are 3 schools that are involved in different repurposing. What I've tried to, in my opinion, try to say that I believe that some repurposing would be considered a closure. I believe that other kinds of repurposing would not be considered a closure. I have not addressed any one of the specific proposals for the individual 3 buildings to give an opinion one way or the other because they may be close calls and somebody's going to have to decide that other than me.
Thank you.
Now, with regard to your question about if the school was not going to be used, for instance, you repurposed it and then you decided the repurposing was not working and now you were going to close it, I believe that your articles are real clear. It makes no difference once you're over 4 years. You can't close anything within 4 years. So underneath your articles, you can't close any school until after 2022. To repurpose it, you do it for 3 or 4 years, and now you decide you want to close it. You're not allowed to close it unless you have a vote of the people in that town. The consequences of if they vote no, where are you? You can return it to the town if the town wants it. Whether or not, how that affects the whole thing on staying in the district, that's a much more complicated thing that you have to follow particular strings, and I'm not going to answer that quite yet until I have a better program on what's there. In terms of step 2, I looked at that. That is a different issue. Again, adding additional towns, there's a statute that controls how you would go about adding additional towns. And you would have to follow the statute to see how that went through it. And whether or not you were able to add other towns comes, as I read the statute quickly, it says that your unified district votes as a whole about what you want to do in terms of enlarging your unified district to add additional towns. Same thing, they would have to vote on it in those towns.
Thank you for that. Don, may I ask a quick additional one?
Yes.
Did you, I know Sitzel, Page, and Fletcher sent you over some information when they conflicted out. Do you have any information? I'm trying to understand, did they consult on this proposal for us ahead of time? Like, do we have anything that, can you speak to kind of the rationale behind the proposal in the first place? Is this something that there's a precedent for?
I know nothing about that. And there's nothing in the material I got, and I have no idea what opinions they had. I was told they had worked to prepare an opinion, but because of the conflict, they weren't going to give it. So I know nothing more than what I've offered.
Okay, I'm all set, Don. Thank you.
All right, Steve?
So I'm frankly in favor of just letting people vote no matter what, but since we're trying to figure out the details here. So there's what the Act 46 has two articles which control this. One is 14, which says if you close the school, the town has to vote. And then 16 says if the children are educated in another town other than the town that they reside in, well, it doesn't say what happens then. It just says that they can't do that. It can't be done. So I'm curious if we're repurposing the school and the plan is to have the kids from Starksboro now have their core education in Moncton. To me, that doesn't jive with Article 16. And what I thought we were going to talk about tonight was the gray area. Apparently in Act 46, not all of the articles were actually included on the ballot. There were only 10 of them or something. I may have this wrong, but Article 14 was included on the ballot, but Article 16 was not. And from what I've heard, and I've talked to a couple of people who were directly involved, and there's some conflicting opinions about this, is if the article wasn't on the ballot, then the school board had the authority to essentially modify the article, within the board itself. The board would have to vote to change the article, but the board would have the authority to modify the article as they saw fit. So I was just curious whether or not that is true, that if it wasn't on the ballot, that it's not a district-wide vote to change the article, or if the board has sole authority to change Article 16. I sort of thought that's where we were headed tonight, but that's my question.
Well, I'm not sure I have sufficient information or knowledge to be able to do that. What I can tell you from what I have looked at, that there are several articles that address what I call use. There's a provision in Article 7 that says the new SD board will encourage and continue to use each building by the students in community in accordance with 16 VSA section 563(3), taking into consideration the policies, practices, procedures followed prior to the formation of the new SD school district. All right. You've got Article 13, you've got 14 and 16, but your warning is all set out in Article 10. and it says the articles to create the new supervisory district will be submitted to the voters, and then it does a warning. I believe, I haven't seen anything else. I haven't been able to look at what was put out to the voters. I haven't been given any of that information to look at or consider. But based upon Article 10, it is a general warning for the adoption of the articles, which I believed included Article 16. But Article 16 is not quite as clear as I believe you were citing the opinion that was submitted by Lincoln. It says the new school district board will support and continue the elementary education of students at the school located in the town where they reside unless such school is closed, provided above. I don't believe
it also provides for some leeway if there's a specific unique need by a particular student.
Particular students. And
Right.
again, I give the perfect example that's going on in education right now. 6th grade is being combined with 7th and 8th grade or middle school because they have find that that's a better combination than keeping 6th graders in an elementary school. So if you decided that you were going to move all 6th graders in all your schools to a middle school and only do K-5 in a particular school, I don't believe that that repurposing or making that kind of decision in any way would constitute a closure, that you didn't have the authority to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree as well that doesn't constitute a closure. It's just whether or not we've tread on Article 16 enough that we have to do something to amend it in order to do the plan that we're proposing right now.
Only if it applied. And again, I would look to see if a court thought that it did apply and limited you depending upon what you were trying to accomplish with that particular school. So at the moment, I can't give it to you because I don't have a clear enough understanding of what specifically you are proposing. You've got ideas that are on the table. It's there. I'm trying to address it more at the 30,000 foot level than the 10,000 foot.
Understood. Thank you.
Kevin?
I guess I would like to understand a little bit better. You had talked a little bit about the district votes as a whole. Towns don't vote for anything by themselves, but nonetheless, we've got this closure clause where the town is voting by itself and affecting the other 4 towns in the district potentially negatively. Is there anything derived in the act that supports that, or is that something that was just typically generated to appease towns, or and what is really the fairness of that a town can impact 4 other towns that won't have any say in it?
I didn't draft the articles. I have no idea what the intent was. I've tried to pick up some of the history. I'm not even sure it directly relates to quote closure. It was language that was put in there. It would be language that if you found it disruptive, you could ask to amend it, at least as I look at it, submit it to all 5 towns and find out what the vote was on whether or not that amendment would apply to Article 14. So I mean, I think that if it created a problem, that might be something you would want to do. I can't tell you because your articles are too ambiguous.
Is there any protections in Act 46 that would support the premise of that article?
Act 46 would fill in some of the voids, if you will, and help try to provide some clarity, which is why I believe that repurposing is something that I think is caught up within the language of Act 46 with what you did. And to the extent that what you would be proposing if you did a K3 instead of a K6, I believe that that would be found to be acceptable. And people would look to Act 46, that seemed to follow within the policy of what was intended and what was there. But somebody who was opposed to it could bring a lawsuit and get a judge to rule differently. It's not clear cut in any way. I wish I could give clearer answers, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob?
No, Steve brought up my inquiry was dealing with Article 16, but just to make clear, I thought I heard you earlier say that in your opinion that not all repurposing is closure, but some repurposing is closure. Thank
Some
you.
repurposing could be closure, absolutely. I think the best one is somebody gave me the example that you use it as a storage facility. Okay, there's no educational efforts going on in the building. That to me would be the equivalent of a closure, and I think a court would easily find that.
Sorry, Dave. I missed you, Dave.
Thank you. So I got a number of emails on this. Like I got a lot of emails on this, but I got a number that relate to the interaction of Section 14 and Section 16 in the Articles of Agreement. And the plain reading of a number of these people who emailed me was, if all the elementary school students are sent down to Bristol, then that violates Article 16 unless the school is deemed to be closed. If the school is deemed to be closed, then moving all the elementary schools to Bristol is legal. If the school is deemed to be open, not closed, then there's an obligation to send the elementary school students to the Lincoln School. Is that, and I hear your dicing of that a little bit, saying if they could reduce it from maybe K through 6 to K through 3 and not violate Article 16. But if all the elementary school students from Lincoln or Starksboro for that matter were sent to, or New Haven, were sent to Bristol and the school was deemed to be open, not closed, then wouldn't the district be in violation of Article 16 if the reconfiguration of the school in any of those towns were deemed to be closing of the school, then it would be legal and appropriate for those elementary students from those 3 communities to be sent to Bristol and Moncton. Is that, I mean, that's what people are telling me. I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on TV, but that's what the arguments people were making in their emails to me.
Okay, so if in Article 16, if it read, the new school district board shall continue, instead of say shall support and continue, if it said shall continue the elementary education of students at the school located in the town where they reside, unless such school is closed as provided above, then I would agree with you. I have no idea why they stuck in the word support, because when you use the word support, it leaves open, sure, I'll support that idea if it makes rational sense. So you have 2 verbs that are in the same thing that are difficult. If all students, as you described it, were moved outside of the town, I think that there is a reasonable argument that a court would say that that was not right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then sorry to jump in, but just to repeat my earlier question, at that point, who has the jurisdiction to modify the article?
The article can be modified by a vote of the electorate, all 5 towns, not by the individual town. The individual towns no longer have any authority to amend an article.
Kristen Blanchette.
Hi, Dawn. Thank you, William. I had another I have a couple questions. Thank you for taking this on. To your knowledge, in Vermont, have there been any lawsuits regarding if schools within the same district provide different unequal educational opportunities for students? In other words, the resources and opportunities open to the children depend on their zip code or the town they live in. Have there been lawsuits in Vermont regarding that?
Well, that's what got us state funding, because there was the argument that you had disproportionate education. Some towns didn't have the same financial wherewithal and couldn't do it. So that's why we went to state funding. Other than that case, I am unaware of any litigation that would address what you're talking about.
But a parent, if they felt one school was offered less opportunity than another school in the same district, could they sue?
Well, here's a lawyer answering that question for you. Anybody can file any lawsuit on almost any subject. The question is, would they prevail? And it would depend upon the facts of the circumstances, Kristen. If by chance there was a prejudice, give you the hypothetical, you got a school that is primarily Black students, and therefore it was being treated differently. They didn't have the same quality teachers, and there was something there. I could create something that they would be able to prevail. As I understand what goes on in Vermont, I don't believe we would have anything like that, but it would depend upon the facts and the evidence that was presented to be able to say that somehow or other there was inappropriate, inadequate, and improper education in that particular school. If it's just for one student and they weren't getting the best of education, that's why a lot of people try to support choice, because some schools seem to meet students' needs better than others. And that's why some districts try to provide some sort of choice among high schools.
Okay. So if one school had a principal full-time and one school had a principal a third of the time, or other, because the school was getting small and there were less, I guess you answered that. So I'm just saying that so you said that could happen.
It could happen. I mean, you're faced with difficult times in education. And the minute that the number of students gets so small that you can't have quite the services you'd want to have, the school that has more students is able to provide a better education. There is pressures. I want to be careful not to name schools, but there are pressures with schools that they're beginning to get too small. And the kids that are going to the Rutland City schools have a great deal more at their disposal because it's a larger school. So there are advantages and disadvantages, and I leave it to each one of the districts to figure out how they're going to try to tackle those difficult problems.
Thank you. I had one other quicker one. Would, if it, in some scenarios, people talked about, dissolving Mount Abe and just sending high school students for school choice or whatever that is. Would that require a district-wide vote in order to do that? I'm not that, I mean, again, I want to repeat that we don't have any scenario that we're putting, I mean, we have a scenario that we're bouncing ideas off of, but we have no etched in stone solid thing. So I'm just trying to get information about other things that we've talked about.
I would prefer not to sort of shoot from the hip on something like that. I would much prefer to sort of get a better understanding, because there are a lot of strings that would be attached to that. And I have to have a better understanding of, you own that school now. I have to go back here. School attendance only looks at elementary education in Article 16. High school is something different. There are a lot of pieces for me to have to deal with that. So I feel uncomfortable to answer it, Kristen.
Okay, no, thank you.
I'll just add one of the strings, Phil, is the articles do state that we operate as a K-12 district. So we'd be changing that operation in the closure of Mount Abe. So in all likelihood, it seems like it would require that, but that's worth further investigation.
Thank you, William. Yeah, if you could investigate that now that you're our lawyer. And oh, one last thing.
Well,
Would
you
it
have to
be,
still decide you
sorry.
want to stay with me after tonight.
So would it be helpful for us to speak to the lawyer who did draw up this, or was that the law firm that is now disqualified?
That's a law firm that's now disqualified.
Thank you. I'm done. Thank you for letting me have some time there, guys. Thanks.
Sarah McLean.
Yeah, thank you, William, for taking this on. I guess I just want clarification. I'm a little bit confused, specifically when we're talking about Article 16. And it seems like you had said that the word support is kind of what confuses the understanding. So the new SD board shall support and continue the elementary education of students at the school located in the town where they reside, unless such school is closed as provided above. Can you unpack that a little bit more for me?
Probably not. The way that I look at it, I don't know if it was Dave or Rob that asked if the word support was not there, the hypothetical that he gave me, where all K through 6 were moved out, how would that apply? And I tried to give an opinion. I said, with the word support, it creates some ambiguity. I can't say it creates huge ambiguity, but it does create some confusion in my mind on what was intended and what was meant. And to apply it to a hypothetical that I don't have the details on, I don't think I can unpack it any better than that.
Okay. And if I can ask another question, just another clarifying question. So I've been revisiting the meetings of the Act 46 committee, trying to just, to witness what their process was in creating the articles of agreement for Act 46, for the adoption of Act 46 in our district. And my understanding was that there was the order, which is Article 10. So the warning, I guess, is another way to say it. And I don't know, maybe I'm combining two things that are not the same thing. And that is what cannot be changed unless it is voted on by the majority of our voters as a merged vote within our district. And then from the last meeting that I was watching, it appeared that the other articles that were not directly named in the order were up for amendment by a majority of the board's vote. And it seemed to me like you were saying that any kind of amendment would have to go to the electorate, to our owners, to the voters.
Okay, so let me try to unpack your multiple questions and see if I can get them. Article 10, since it's the warning, is already been published and advertised and is the basis. So for the vote that occurred to adopt your articles. So Article 10 really can't be amended anymore because it's already served its purpose. All of the other articles are now subject to amendment at any time by vote of the electorate of the 5-town district. That's the way I would unpack what I think you were trying to ask.
Yep, that's a clarification. That's a different understanding than I had. Thank you.
Sorry, and Krista.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? We have about 10 more minutes in this section. Did anything bring up another question for anyone else?
I have a question.
Andrew.
So more from just a legal 101 for those of us who aren't attorneys or haven't been involved in lawsuits. So whatever path we move forward with and some party decides to file suit, can you just help the board understand what that looks like? How does that go? And I know it's a hypothetical, but just like a basic 101, what happens? How long does it take? What should we expect?
Okay, so let me try to give you two scenarios. I used the word declaratory judgment earlier when I did my presentation, and you asked about a lawsuit. So there are two ways in which questions and concerns can be raised. I will take the lawsuit approach that you started off with, Andrew. The board adopts some sort of repurposing program and begins to proceed down that path. They accept that the repurposing, I give an opinion that I think it would have a pretty good chance of being upheld by a court. And you decide to proceed down that path. And you've heard me say the K3 program. Okay, you pick a K3 program for a couple of schools and you do something else, you're repurposing the building. If a town, I don't believe a town could do it, but if voters or a voter felt it was wrong, what they would do is go to court and file a motion for an injunction to stop this and prevent it, in order that it was not authorized underneath the articles, and that the action that was taken by the board is outside its authority. Then the person who brought the lawsuit, the district would then answer it, respond to it. You are probably looking, because it's dealing with a school, I would think the court would want to move it along fairly promptly. So you're probably talking 9 months before you could get any decision from a court, yay or nay. There'd be some discovery, arguing back and forth, the typical kind of situation. But I think you are talking about that amount of time, plus or minus. These are guesses from my 40 years of experience. Then if the decision was not what the person who filed the lawsuit wanted, they have the right to take it on appeal to the Supreme Court. Decisions to the Supreme Court take 6 to 9 months on something like this. Sometimes they take longer, but I would think that this would have some sort of priority. So I think that's the amount of time. On the other hand, you could, as a district, if you had a repurposing plan and you didn't want to start down a path and get into a lawsuit, you could, when you had a clear understanding of what you wanted, go to a court, ask the court, would you please rule that we have the authority to do this, because we don't want to do anything wrong. We want to make sure it's clear. And then you would advertise and see who was interested to defend it. If nobody did, then it would sit with the court, try to give a declaratory judgment, And if no one wanted to appeal it, it would be done. If they wanted to appeal, you got the same amount of time. So those are the two ways that the issue could get presented to a court. And the only way to get a definitive answer is by going to court.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a few more minutes. Any board members, it stirred up another question? Liz?
I understand that there are restrictions for towns on what they can do with their building were they to get it back. And at some point I would like, otherwise they have to repay an amount. I don't understand those completely. So if there could be further explanations on what restrictions a town would have if they closed and decided to keep it, that would be helpful. And I guess also going back to the question about high school choicing out, I don't know if it's possible, if it's an option that a town could maintain their high school and have it be one of the choices for people where they would go. But just because they could choose to go to another place, would that mean that Mount Aid couldn't be one of those choices? Thank you.
In terms of selling, it depends upon how long the building has been in service, whether or not there's any money due back to the state because the state provided some funding for it. I will tell you that for the Rutland City school system, we've sold buildings and no money goes back. It stays within the district. So it depends upon the building, depends upon how the financing has occurred. So that's one of those things that you would cross when you knew what the circumstances were for a building. In terms of if you offer choice, how does that affect what you're doing? That's wide open. It shouldn't affect what you're doing with Mount Abraham as a high school, at least as I understood your question. But that seemed to be a whole new area, and I really don't want to walk down that path.
Okay. Rob?
Again, thank you for your time. Just so I have clarity, you've mentioned the idea of repurposing being like taking a K6 and maybe making it a K3. In this current proposal, 2 of our K6 schools become innovation centers. So you feel that you could argue that is a fair use of that facility under our Articles of Agreement as a school?
I don't know enough about your innovation program. Haven't been able to have enough time to take a look at it to see whether or not I think it might meet a test. I have a certain amount of uncomfortability that would be enough because I don't know enough about it. So I don't want to give any opinion on it, Rob, because I haven't seen the plan, the proposal, what the educational piece is. Patrick did send some material to me, but I haven't been able to read all of the material that has been provided to me. So I've tried to stay focused on what I thought was there and not get down into the weeds and hope that if that became necessary, when you were better able to refine it, then I could give you some direction one way or the other. But my answer is just an opinion. It's not binding on anything. And if the town didn't like it, you have a lawsuit or you've got something that's at issue.
Okay, we have 3 more minutes. If anybody has it, now's your time. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. Well, thank you, Bill and Andrew, for joining us and taking the time to listen and answer the questions that people had.
It's a pleasure. It was nice meeting you. I'm not sure that this was quite the way I expected that this would roll out, but it's been a fascinating evening, and I hope I have been helpful, at least in providing some information and giving you some additional choices so that you guys can deal with some difficult choices that you have in front of you. I wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Oh, you all hopped around again. Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is an action item to determine a timeline for decision making. So we don't have an official wording or motion. I guess, can we relax the rules for a little bit and have a discussion? And then when we sort of have an idea where everybody is, then we can move. But I don't want to open it up too much that we just spin our wheels in circles. So as far as discussion, is there, given what I said at the beginning, and I know Kristen, you missed what I said at the beginning.
Can you repeat it, John?
Sure. So Kristen, at the beginning, I mentioned that the second item on our agenda is an action item to determine a timeline for decision making. As your chair, it's my responsibility to ensure the integrity of the board process. And I know we're all aware of the tremendous amount of work that has gone into us getting us to where we are today. These last few weeks have been especially unsettling to me. I have real concerns about our ability to fully understand our responsibility as a board and make a strong group decision. I don't think we can have a deep discussion as a group about all of this in just 2 meetings. That is why I added this item to the agenda tonight. I'm coming to you tonight to recommend that in the interest of working together as a group and continuing to really understand the decision in front of us, and to allow us time to further study what we are faced with, that we take action tonight that gives us the time we need. I'm asking that we commit to further study. I'm asking you to not take action this month to consider options on this town meeting day. I recognize that this may result in a vote later in this year or even the next town meeting day. I'm not asking you to pause our work. I'm asking you to take more time to study everything and make a well thought out decision. I think we all understand that this is not a decision that can be put off indefinitely, and we need a plan if our district is going to have a future. I'm well aware that what I am recommending could cause some financial hardship to our district, but I do believe that if we make a decision based on our work together in an in-depth study, we will demonstrate ourselves as true trustees of our school.
Thank you.
Sure. So Annie, do you have any comments that you, or discussion that you want to start regarding the timeline?
Not right now, not yet. I want to hear what other people are thinking.
Okay, Sarah LaPearl.
I have mixed opinions. I really would love us to unify and build something together. And I would love to start that off as soon as possible because I think that is best for the kids. And that is how I feel. And I'm going to say that out loud. I think we should be working together promptly and really trying to get people on board with making something happen that is good. And this does not need to be divisive, rather insulting to some people in other towns. And that part is sad to me that has gotten out of hand. And I don't know that a timeline, I worry about dragging out a timeline that it will just cause this to continue. But I do hope that if we choose a longer timeline, that the purpose is to come together and to make something that is good for kids, for all kids in every town.
Thank you. Liz?
Thank you, Sarah. I do feel a part of this that's a problem is that we haven't been able to have face-to-face communication. And I think that really changes the way that we relate to each other and connect with each other. It has been fantastic over the last couple of years to get to know people from all of our 5 towns. I feel more connected to every town than I had ever before I joined the school board. And so my hope would be also that we really used whatever time we had to engage with each other in really meaningful ways, and really thought about each other's needs and what's most important, and maybe considered that we have differences in what's most important to us, because students have different needs and families have different needs from each other. So to really November election, I do like doing it on an election day. That's already there, because I feel like it gives a lot more access to people who are expecting to vote and intend to vote. Also part of me thinks, what if a school did close, and what if, do they, I would want myself, I would want as much notice and planning time and preparation. So I guess I thank you, Dawn, so much for your letter and for what you read today. I really appreciate the importance of keeping it open and open-ended and not getting a hard stance on anything. So I do support holding off on a vote at this time, but maybe till November if other people agree to that.
Thank you, Liz. Andrew?
Sure. So I don't object in principle to pushing this off a little bit. However, I feel like I do not want to continue kicking this can down the road, and that there should be a backstop, and a fairly quick backstop to this, because the budget pressures are real. I think that part of what I'm seeing is it sounds like people are a bit surprised about this happening, despite the fact that we've been talking about this for years. And there's been some hope that we can push it off. But I suspect that folks who aren't in agreement with anything we come up with are going to want to continue to push it off as just a way to try to maintain the status quo. So if we push this off, I don't want to push it off very long, and I want us to keep focused on this issue so that we actually can do something with this, because I think our kids are going to suffer if we don't.
Thank you, Andrew. Caleb?
Well, I know we're going through and having kind of a more relaxed discussion, which is nice. I have a motion I'd like to make, and I don't know if now's the time. So, is it?
I'm not sure. Do other members want to hear what everybody has to say first? I think they do.
Yes.
So if we can just give everybody once through to hear what they have to say, Caleb, and then I'll come back to you.
That's great. That's great. And yeah, fantastic. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Caleb. Steve?
So my understanding of the timeline, the deadline that we're up against, is that we're okay for this March. The FY22 budget is a good budget. It's solid. It gives us a year to implement some kind of plan. But next March, we're going to have a cliff, which we're either going to just drive the car off of and land at the bottom and pick up the pieces, or we're going to develop a plan, take this year that we've been gifted by Montpelier, and implement a plan that makes the landing in 23 something that's good for kids, and keeps us from dire circumstances. That's really just a year. And Patrick, I had a question about I was confused as been when we need to alert staff of the possible rifts. I think that's sometime in the fall, isn't it?
The language is really as soon as practical or as soon as
Right.
possible. So it's
Yeah.
it's pretty vague in terms of what the contract requires for notification.
Yeah, I mean,
Really, it's mostly
April
mostly it's an
1st is-
ethical obligation to, if we're going to be having conversations in open session with the board about someone whose job may be implicated, to me, it's really important that that person knows before it's announced publicly at a meeting like this. So that typically is why it has happened in the fall, is because when we start getting into some details as a small district, it becomes pretty identifiable pretty quickly whose job is being lost.
Right. So in my mind, that's kind of the deadline. If we need to make major staff cuts, if, for instance, we decided not to do anything and just let, whatever happens, happen, then we would need to make between 38 and 58 staff cuts next fall. We'd have to start alerting people that that was going to happen. That's tomorrow. That's why I've always sort of grimaced when I saw all of these let's put things off emails, is because I see this is not a short time period before we have to actually do something. And I think if we're going to if we're going to take more time, I think it's going to cost us, and we have to be prepared to finance that somehow. So, if we don't want FY23 to be a cliff, and we want it to be maybe just a step, then we have to ask voters to maybe pick up a one-time penalty, or make some, share the pain around somehow. But I think we're going to have to come up with some way to make 23 not so jolting if we're going to take more time for the long term. That's my thought.
Okay, thank you. Kevin?
I have mixed feelings. In my mind, and I've advertised this, I consider Patrick's proposal the baseline, if you will, and look at any sort of alternatives that hit all the bases or improvements. And there just isn't anything out there. And a lot of people are at a disadvantage too, but I don't think, based on people that do make comments, I don't think they understand the level of the issue. So I think, so I have issues that it's not going to change dramatically, my opinion. And if we wait, and by the way, I don't think there's any major elections in November. I think it's going to be an off year. So either we do a special election before next March, or we wait a year and do something next March. And I'm thinking, and this sounds like a glass half full, but the naysayers are going to still be naysaying when the decision comes around again. I understand there'll be some people that, yeah, okay, I understand this better and get more comfortable with it, but I don't see a big education process that will be successful. I am more concerned at this point about the mounting lawyers that are getting involved in this, or threats of lawyers getting involved in this. And I think we need to get really crisp with the articles of the articles, and understand what, if anything, we want to do there real soon. And that would be probably the biggest rationale from my point of view on delaying this thing for a while, because once you get into that litigation stuff, it's not going to be months, it's going to be years, and it won't be pretty. I'm also concerned as this thing starts going down the road, and towns are talking about being violated because they didn't get to vote, but there's, depending on which town or towns, are looking to exercise their vote, which is basically a way of saying that I'm not going to approve this. There are 2, 3, 4 other towns that are negatively impacted by that, and I think there needs to be a much broader consideration as to how that impact is impacted or dealt with across the district as opposed to a single town. So I guess my message or my thought process is we really need to get crisp on the bylaws or make a conscious decision not to. And that is probably the riding reason why I'm thinking that I can deal with some sort of delay.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Dave?
Thank you. I think more thought has to go into how we move forward, and we have to do and better communication. I think that I have gotten a number of emails that ask me why the superintendent's speaking for the board. And I think, you know, while the intention is not there, I think the optics are. And if there's a communication from the board, I sent out a note to all board members of how we can access all 5 front porch forums. So a board member can speak for the board, and we should clean up our communications with our communities so that we begin to engender support for our work as a board and an understanding that we're looking at options and doing our very best to do best for the children. I completely agree with what Sarah LaPearl was saying about figuring out what's best for our children. That's our job. And yes, we have to take taxes into account because it is taxpayers that fund this enterprise. So in that regard, I would suggest, I would be willing to double the amount of meetings, to meet every other week. You know, I'm not a fond of meetings. I'm particularly not a fond of Zoom meetings. But we have a job to do, and we signed up for this responsibility. And I'm willing to take the time necessary to do the best I can to support the children and my fellow board members and the staff in our district to deliver a great school district. I would suggest that the first step we take is that we enter into immediate conversations with Virgins, and that we send 3 grades to Virgins, 7, 8, and 9, call it junior high school. And then 10, 11, and 12, re-educate at Mount Abe. We should be able to make some staff reductions, both in terms of administration and in terms of educators, because we'll reduce a certain amount of duplication. It shouldn't require a vote of any community. We're not going to close Lincoln School. These students are already accustomed to leaving home to go to school. And particularly for high school students, most of them do not take the bus anyway. And so that's administratively and from a board perspective, that's a pretty easy, I think, on the surface. Now the devil's always in the details, and maybe it turns out to be impossible. But it seems to me that's a thing worth considering, particularly since my understanding is that, and one of the mistakes I think we made in Bristol was mixing middle school students with high school students. So this would give us an opportunity to separate middle school and high school, make some savings, give us a glide path. And to Steve's concern about staff cuts, I think any proposal that's under consideration, anything that we're considering, includes significant reduction in staff, because that's where the money is, and that's what we're going to have to do. Our job is to figure out how we can deliver the best education we can with the limited number of staff people that we have, that we are able to hire. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Rob?
Yeah, I echo what Sarah stated earlier. I think, you know, being new on the board, I haven't even fulfilled 1 year yet. I'm still sort of learning how to fly while building the plane, I feel like, on top of COVID and all of this. But the way I've viewed this entire process is it's been through what's best for the taxpayer. And, you know, I think you could argue what's best for the taxpayer is having a really vibrant local elementary school in their town, which keeps their property values high. I think there's an argument there. I think we need to look at this, what's best for our taxpayer, what's best for our faculty and staff. You know, having to lose 91, you know, early educators or staff members over the next 5 years, and think that we'll still hold on to those projected numbers from the NESDEC report as far as student enrollment goals, I think is really pretty short-sighted in all honesty. And so I think delaying this, Dawn, I completely agree with with what you have said in delaying it. I don't necessarily have a recommendation for a timeline per se, but we definitely have people's ear. I've gotten over 200 emails. We've gotten letters from numerous towns with signatories close to, you know, by the end of it, I added up, probably I've heard from 1,000 people in our district. And so we have people's ear, and now is the time to really engage the community to possibly, you know, try to figure this out together. And I think we can really find some creative solutions that are best for our kids, our staff, and I think would satisfy those taxpayers that vote up or down, whether or not they're going to fund the schools the way we ask them to. So I appreciate, Dawn, that you put that out there. And I also echo Dave. I think we should meet more often. And that's where I sort of stand at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Kristen Blanchett.
Trying to open up my speaker. So my kids have attended MAUSD for 14 years, and I've got 3.5 to go. Hoping the new administration will help with college costs. And from my perspective, MAUSD is already an under-resourced school district. I'm concerned about equity for students. And I just want to share another personal observation. 3 times during parent-teacher conferences in elementary school, teachers cried to my husband and I, and sometimes my student was there, because they had multi-age classrooms and could not meet the needs of the varied students in a 5-6 or a 3-4. And I don't see how smaller is better. And if people want to vote for that, I think we should have people voting on things. I would have to resign from the board because I can't oversee creating even less resourced schools. So I think we should let towns decide. And if they decide that, you know, I wouldn't move to this district. I wouldn't move to a tiny school. My husband and I wouldn't do that. Some people would, and they like that. I think that does not serve the students, especially that we're trying to improve into the proficient area. You know, students on free and reduced lunch and IEPs and things who, through no fault of their own, struggle in school. And I think we need to think about those things. And I don't know if any timeline is going to help us. This is a hard nut to crack. I don't know what we should do. I really don't. And I just don't see how a $12,000 difference in how much it costs to educate a student in one town is equitable or financially makes sense. I just don't see how that makes sense. But, you know, it's a democracy and people need to decide So we have a lot of work to do. I think we do need more time to do it, but I agree we need to have a backstop. I agreed with Andrew. But this is already an under-resourced school district, K through 12. Our children did not have the opportunities as children in other towns and districts in the state and in this country. And we're not just preparing our kids for living in Vermont, probably. We want them to be able to compete in the country and in the world. And we need to give them the best education we can. And I don't have the answer, but we need to come up with an answer. So good luck to us. And I feel like we have been engaging with the community, but it's hard to make people pay attention until they feel alarmed, apparently. So anyway, I just wish us a lot of luck, and we have a couple meetings next week where we can work on it more.
Thank you, Kristen. Sarah McLean.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Dawn, for asking to put pause on this for now. The community, as has been said, is engaged now, for better or worse. And I think we can harness that engagement and really kind of forge a path forward, in due time, not years down the road, but sooner than later. I also have really appreciated the emails that I've gotten, we've all gotten, that have said that people are really interested and or concerned about what's happening at the board and administrative level. And they simply don't have the bandwidth right now to engage, given all of the challenges of COVID. So I think that putting a little bit of pause is a way of honoring that. We also need more information. I mean, we started at December 7th. We're here at January 13th. We have received a lot of information. We've had very little time to digest. We've had even less time to deliberate as a board on the information we've received. Our attorney can't inform us whether or not the plan for repurposing constitutes closing, because I don't know why he couldn't, but the way I understood is that he didn't have enough information. I don't feel like I have enough information. So I welcome more information, more time to digest the information, more conversations with our community about how we need to move forward. Because like Sarah had said, something needs to happen, something needs to change, something needs to give here. So I definitely support putting a pause for now and just having more time with this proposal. And I also am hoping that we will continue to meet next week on the 20th or 21st. I don't know where we've landed when that, maybe that's part of this process. Because I would love to hear Patrick's presentation or answering of the additional questions that we had asked in late December.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Krista.
Hi, thank you, Dawn. Also, just to echo what Sarah was saying, in appreciation for your recognition of where we're at and the need to regroup. I am just wondering what we need as a board to be able to move forward, because I think you're right in seeing that we're lacking that confidence, and in turn the community is lacking that confidence in us, or maybe it's we're not confident because the community isn't confident in us. Regardless, trying to think about what it is we need so that if we are going to take more time, it's time well spent. And I also agree with Kevin's observation that we've gotten really quickly into a litigious place. And I think about how we shifted out of the way we do our negotiations to an interest-based bargaining model, where we really sit and dialogue with different parties about shared values and common interests. And I think we've done that to some degree with the community early on. But I think that, we might need to do more of that. I wonder if, as we think about the different options we've explored, we might look at a model like the way the strategic plan was developed, where we use some of this time to develop groups of folks looking at different possible solutions that include staff members, students, board members, administrators, community members. Maybe that would help with our bridge building. I think that, that model for the strategic plan of involving the key constituents worked really well. And it helped to build more confidence in what we were hoping to do as a district. And I wonder if that's a model that would help this board figure out how to move forward, knowing that we've heard the voices from representatives of the different groups that are involved. There were a couple other things that I was going to say, and I've just lost them. Oh, the other thing I was thinking about is that, right now as a board, I'm not sure we're all on the same page with whether we're representing our district or our towns. And I understand why we are in that place, but I think it's worth some more exploration. What does equity mean to us as a board? Does that mean that we are ensuring that each of our 5 towns has a school that's thriving? Does it mean that we're looking at the whole? If we don't have a high school, does that change how we answer that question? And, I think that is worth some more exploration and conversation among this group as a way to maybe build a stronger board. So I guess overall, I'm in support of pausing, but I very much think we need a plan for how we're going to use the time well, so that it isn't just a repetition of what we've done before, but that it recognizes that people are paying attention and are interested in being a part of this process, and that it ultimately builds confidence in this board to make decisions about how to move forward.
Thank you, Krista. Okay, that's everybody. Now, Caleb, I said I'd come back to you, so I'm back at you, Caleb.
Okay, thanks. So I do have a motion to make, and so context for it. I'll just make the motion, and then Don, if I could put my hand up for discussion when we get there, if somebody seconds it. But basically, what I would like to do is move that we request the permissions of the towns to close their elementary schools, and I move that we request that from all 5 towns, and that the schedule for those votes should be determined by the towns. And that's the motion.
Okay, is there a second? Dave, is that you? Dave?
I would second if there was one vote date for all 5 towns. I think different dates for the 5 towns would be a problem. Would you amend your motion in that way, Caleb?
I'm happy to amend it in that way, Dave. I'll mention it when I discuss it. We can always change it back, but yes, I'll amend it that way.
Okay.
So
Right.
amended.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second. So Caleb, I'll let you speak first because
Thank you.
have some
Yeah, so
clarifying.
here's what I'm thinking. I agree we need more time. I actually didn't think that we were allowed to vote this month anyway. That's just one person's opinion. So I thought that we needed this process anyway, and that actually this would be moving as fast as we legally can. Here's my rationale. If a school gives us permission to close their school, we don't have to, but we can. We clearly can. If a town doesn't give permission, there's no reason we cannot ask them again. And it may be that some of our communities need to see some of these, I don't know what else to call them, severe cuts. I won't call them draconian because it's not anybody doing it like on purpose. It's going to be bad, right? So we might need to see some of those things. So we could ask that permission again. Some towns might say yes. People have heard these arguments. You know, some towns might say yes because there is a purpose for the building, that maybe a debt-free, well-maintained building that they get for $1, that there is a town energy to do something else with, which would have limitations, as I think Les mentioned. I think that if we undertook this process, I am not at all certain of what the outcome would be, but the current proposal is, as I said in a previous meeting, a reasonable proposal. It is not the, you know, I disagree that we have the process to just sort of enact it without checking with towns, but it's a reasonable proposal given our situation. It's not the only reasonable proposal. And I think that opining here, we're just going to only get through whatever significantly different route we take if we enter into it with as much trust and as much fidelity to our founding articles as possible. Whether or not there is a legal loophole around the sort of bedrock argument of the school closure article that was warned, to me, it doesn't matter. The spirit, I think, was clear, and I want to honor that. So I want to ask, because this is serious enough to make this request of our towns. This is kind of the ultimate survey. This is the binding question. And I don't want to have us spending less time or more time asking for it. That's what I wanted to say. I'll stop there. Other than to Dave's point, the legislature just passed, or the House did, and it will quickly be passed by the Senate, H32, I want to say, maybe it's H38, but basically it changes town meeting rules. You can delay your meeting or you can do it all by Australian ballot. Different towns might make different decisions. And so I think that if some towns chose to take this up at an Australian ballot, it just literally might be that all of our 4 towns have town meetings not only on different days, like a Saturday versus a Monday, but they could have them 3 months apart. We could have a town that decides to hold it in June and have an outdoor town meeting. So I think that was the only reason that I said that about different dates. I do ultimately think this is information we need to get back, and that it will take time, and that time can be well spent by this board. Thank you for hearing me out.
Okay. Annie, Denny, do you have any comments about the motion?
I'm not sure I entirely understand it, so I'm going to keep listening because I think it'll probably become more clear to me as other people talk about it.
Okay, thank you. Sarah LaPearl?
I get parts of it. I honestly can't say I'm totally comfortable with it at the moment. I would need a lot more thought behind that to actually agree to it. I don't want the intent. I don't want to come across on the other side of it either. I guess or it feels like we're circling around back a different way, and I don't know. I'm not opposed. I'm just not sure I'm for it.
All right, thank you. Andrew?
So I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, I think there is the legal, as Caleb was saying, maybe the legal interpretation, and then I think there's the spirit of the Articles of Agreement, and that even with that, it sounds like there might be some disagreement on the spirit of the Articles of Agreement, what that meant when Act 46 was being written by the study committee versus how it sounds now. There is part of me that would like to put it out to the electorate, just so that, frankly, those with a democracy, with the right to a democratic vote comes the responsibility. And by putting it out to everyone, they bear the responsibility for the direction and the future of this district instead of 13 members on a board and the superintendent. So if things don't go well, because enrollment numbers continue to decline, and there was no huge influx of folks from COVID, that we can at least say, we told you what was happening, here's the information, here's how you voted, and now here's where we're at. And we're in a pickle, and we said we were going to be in a pickle, and now we are. So there is part of me that would really like to see that for the voters to take responsibility for that. I'm concerned that probably no one's going to vote to close their school. and that it's going to be a long process where we come right back around and we're standing right where we are. So I wouldn't think that I would want to vote on that tonight. I would want to sound this out with the rest of you a bit more before, because we've been talking about needing more time. I think this is a vote that would also need some more time too.
Okay. Caleb, you'd be next on the list, but I let you go first, so I'm going to skip by you. Okay. Okay. Steve.
So one of the reasons why I think the delay makes some sense is that I think people have been concentrating a lot in these emails on the voting issue, which is a bit of a red herring, and two, what they don't like about the current proposal. What I've found very little of in these emails is a real understanding of what they're voting for when they vote against the proposal. I don't think people really understand what the cliff looks like. It's one of the reasons why I was asking for a better picture of FY23, with slides that show the same sort of issues that we pointed out in the FY26 slides. Show what FY23 looks like, get people really a clear picture of how they're wonderful, perfectly wonderful schools that they have today, even with Kristen's, hesitation about what we're providing at the moment, that picture is not going to be pretty in FY23, and they're voting for that when they vote against the current proposal. Now, some people have also said that they think this is not the only proposal we could look at. I've spent a lot of time looking at all the other options. I'm having a hard time understanding how Patrick came up with anything except this proposal on December 7th. And that's why I don't think it's an end run around the voters. It's not an end run around the voters when it's the only plan you have. So it may be that we're not going to come up with another plan in the next 6 months, but I think people need to understand what they're voting for when they vote against it. And it may be that some clever folks will come up with something that's not on the table right now, and that can also happen in a delay. That's fine. So I'm not really against the delay so much as not taking so much time doing it that we just crash into 23 without a plan. And one thing I like about the plan is that we have one. I'm happy that we have a parachute to pull when the car goes off the cliff. It's getting people to understand that dynamic that I think is lacking right now in the conversations that I'm seeing.
Thank you, Steve. Kevin?
I'm not excited about putting it out to vote. I think it's naive to think that we don't know what the votes are going to be in the respective towns. And actually, being a Bristol rep, I probably have no skin in the game because it's the anchor school in the district, for a number of reasons, and maybe I shouldn't be so vocal. But on the other side, there's a certain amount of inequity that I am really starting to think about a lot, where one or two schools may decide they don't want to close, and due to the relative expense of keeping those schools open, hamstringing the district by keeping those schools open, it affects all the other towns, including my town, which is the poorest town in the district. If nobody knows that, all you got to do is look at the statistics. It's got the lowest median income in the district. It's the highest with free lunch and food. It was where the ELP program started because it had that base to develop and all that kind of stuff. So to end up representing a town within the district that's going to end up at a disadvantage because some other towns that are more affluent want to keep their concept of a Norman Rockwell painting or whatever, is starting to weigh a lot on me. So after that ramble, I'm thinking that we need to start thinking about things from a district point of view, not a town point of view.
Thank you, Kevin. Dave?
So I agree that we need to look at things from a district point of view. I think the chair said it eloquently at the first or second meeting I was attending, that that's our individual responsibility. We're voted in by members of our community, and so they're our direct constituents. But we have responsibility greater than our own community, and so that's important, I think, for us to think about the children of all our 5 towns. I think that this vote will be an interesting thing. A lot of the testimony we took in creating Act 46 said that a school of 100 students or more was viable, financially viable. And as I understand enrollment numbers, that's all of our schools with the exception of New Haven. If I went by the emails that I've received, I think the residents of New Haven are the least concerned about closing the school in their community. First of all, because I think they like gaining the pre-K program, and that community is much more oriented around Middlebury than the rest of the district. So it wouldn't surprise me that that particular town votes approval to close its school. And that would be an interesting thought, huh? What if we have just one school close? Or what if Starksboro and New Haven vote to close, and then that creates like another configuration. What do we do with Lincoln in that case? What about elementary school choice among our elementary students? So you want to be in a classroom with more of your own peers and just one grade. Maybe we see a migration into the Bristol school in the next year or two, and we have outlying schools that don't have 100 kids, and we can say, look, these schools are no longer viable, and we need to close them, and maybe we would get more support from the communities at that point. And another thought is this notion I have of doing this exchange with an interaction with Virgins at the junior high and the high school level may show to our communities as at large, both our children and our taxpayers, that our sense of community could be a lot larger than Bristol or Lincoln. It could be the northern half of Addison County, and our sense of community can include kids from Virgins who are going to be on our basketball team. And so we move those two communities who have been sports rivals since I can remember, since the schools were made in '68 till the present. The last couple of years with having a joint football team has begun to bring these communities together. So we can demonstrate to voters in all of our towns what cooperation, collaboration, moving students around, how that's beneficial. So I think there's ways to approach this. I think we could get some people in that could testify as to a path that we can present in a way that people don't feel that it's draconian, as was mentioned before. So for all of those reasons, I think we have work to do ahead of us, big work. Even if we go with the proposal that Superintendent Reen put before us, if in the end we decide that's the right path, we have an awful lot of work to do so that it doesn't end up in court, so that we don't have thousands of angry citizens and people leaving our towns because they're mad at the school board. That's just as important as figuring out what the actual structure of the district needs to be by the time we get done. Thank you.
So just a point of clarification, isn't Lincoln less than 100 students or not? So we have 2 schools that are less than 100 and 2 schools that are barely over 100?
That's correct. 2 schools under 100, 2 schools that are around 120, and then obviously Bristol considerably more than 100.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Rob?
To try to get back to Caleb's motion, my reflection on it, I just think any school that is currently operating the way it is now, and we move as a board at some point to operate that school differently, I would say in any way, shape, or form, that we need to go to that individual town and ask them if they approve. That's just my baseline. That being said, I guess maybe preemptively asking that question this town meeting day. I don't know where that lands with me quite yet, but I guess my line is that if it's repurpose, if it's closure, if it's just something different than a K-6 school that it is now, that we ask the voters of that town, they're up or down. We owe it to them. They were sold that Act 46, that this unification was not about school closure, and that's what people voted to approve. And so I want to honor that.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Kristen Blanchett?
Hi, I'm going to put on my Mount Abe Virgins football hat. That's my son's hat. So we're already combining somewhat. I'm not endorsing anything by doing that. My daughter's on the Virgins lacrosse team because the Mount Abe kids go over there. The boys go to Mount Abe. Ed is the coach. He's awesome. Ed Cook. I don't know if he's watching. But anyway, so in the spirit of your, I understand the spirit of your motion, Caleb, and I think I think people are already confused, and I think it's too confusing to put something like that out in the absence of an overall comprehensive plan. People will say, well, why am I voting on this? I guess you could say, well, it's like a shooting gallery at the fair. If we pick off a duck, then we only have to deal with 4 more ducks or something. But I don't know. I think it's confusing. And I just want to say, I think we have put out lots of information about the cliff. And I was going to try last week to address that and put it on one page on the website, but I've been too busy. You know, the December 7th Patrick slideshow, video 2 that we made, the FY22 budget and projections for the other budgets, show the financial part of the cliff, and Patrick's slideshow shows the interior of the schools for the cliff. So there is a lot of information to give people, and that's why we're also concerned, but it's hard, I guess, I don't know, it's just hard to get information absorbed that's for some reason. So I think it's confusing in the absence of an overall plan. That's just my comment about that.
Thank you, Kristen. Sarah McLean?
Yeah, I will echo what Rob said, that, you know, if we're going to ask the schools to be repurposed or used in any way other than the way that they're being used currently, that we need a town vote. I think it's an interesting idea to bring the vote to the towns, you know, sooner than later, which would inevitably greatly inform our process moving forward. Even just knowing the numbers on one side or the other. I mean, I don't know if you guys heard the votes from Ripton and Weybridge from last night. There was, you know, Weybridge voted to stay in their district and Ripton voted to exit their district, which I think was, both results were surprising. So I don't think that we can assume that we would know what the vote would be. It seems to me that through the democratic process, we're able to hear voices that we otherwise don't hear. That being said, I will agree with Kristen. I think it's a bit confusing because what are we asking our community? You know, we're saying, okay, so you're going to vote to close your school, and then we haven't fully baked the and then part of it. You know, if we all believe that we're going to need to close schools at the end of our inquiry or this process, however long it takes, then this piece of information would be useful. But I do worry that it's confusing. I mean, I've been driving through Ripton, and the fervor to exit the district and to save their school is everywhere, and they had they didn't have a clear path. I don't know. It seems more confusing. So I'm not sure where I land on that.
Thank you, Sarah. And Krista.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I agree that that if we're going to move forward in a way that changes the configuration of schools, we should bring it to the towns to vote on it. I'm not sure we're prepared to do that now. So I would not support this motion.
Okay. Everybody's had a chance to speak. So, and we're running kind of up against our time frame, but so unless somebody has something really pressing that they want to add, I'm going to have you go to voting at this time. Okay, so Krista, are you in favor, opposed, or do you abstain?
Opposed.
Okay, Sarah McLean.
Confused? No.
I don't have a category for that.
Come on. I think I'm opposed at this point.
Okay, Kristen Blanchett.
Opposed.
Okay, Rob.
Opposed.
Okay, Dave Sharp. Dave? You're in favor?
Yes.
In favor, okay. Kevin?
No.
You're opposed, all right. Steve?
Yeah, I'm opposed at this time too.
Okay. Caleb?
I'm in favor.
Okay. Andrew?
Opposed.
Okay. Liz?
I do. I really appreciate you, Caleb, a lot. I'm opposed at this time without more of a plan, but I appreciate you putting the motion forward. Thank you.
Sarah LaPearl?
Yeah, I agree. I'm opposed, but thanks for the meat of the good conversation.
And Annie?
I agree with Sarah and Liz. I really appreciate that you brought it forward, but I am confused, and I think that I'm opposed at this point as well.
Okay, so that's 10 opposed and 2 in favor. So the motion does not carry. Okay. All right. So it sounds to me like we're in agreement that we need more time to study. I'm thinking a majority of you don't want an open-ended. You want a time frame.
Yes.
If we're going to continue to study it, you want a time period of how much more study. So I'm wondering if somebody would like to make a motion with a time frame in mind, and we can try to go through that, or whether you want to, it's almost 8 o'clock now, whether you want to table this discussion and come back at it again in order to spend.
Sorry, I was going to ask a question, but I
Sure.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's all right. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if we want to go forward on the 20th with hearing from Patrick what information he's gathered in response to our questions, and hearing the preliminary analysis from the survey. And then have a conversation about our timing.
We'd have more information at
I
that
agree
time.
with Krista on that. it's a good plan.
Okay. Dave, you have your hand up.
Yes, I would like to hear more about what's possible with these innovation centers. I think, I don't recall who said it, maybe Kristen, but I apologize if I'm attributing it to the wrong person, that people are just voting against something that they don't know what they're voting for. And I think we heard from the lawyer that said when asked whether the innovation centers was tantamount to closing schools, he couldn't answer because he didn't have enough information, and I don't have enough information. I think if people thought they were really getting something out of these innovation things, or they were voting for something instead of against something, that would be helpful. So I'd like to learn more about these innovation centers and what we're offering the two communities where we're proposing to have innovation centers.
Liz, do you have a?
I guess in response to that, there's so much to unpack. It's almost endless, the number of things that I'm thinking about, and options for if nobody closed. I mean, the thought that, even just the thoughts about, and I know it's not the school board responsibility, but the idea that a town would, just the catastrophe thinking, I don't know. For me though, with the innovation centers, I would really not like that to be predetermined. I think there are so many things they could be. I think they need to be based on student need. I think that we have seen the strategic plan come together. And we saw COVID, we had teachers, we had community members. There's been so many different ways that we've come together and made a plan together. And I just would really, I can understand some more information, but there's the town thinking about how they could repurpose it, or if the school district has it, what they would do to innovate there is different. I mean, I could even, what if, I know there's always people looking for families to stay with. Linden Institute has an on-campus place for high schoolers that come in from other countries, and they stay on campus, and what a beautiful community that is. I mean, it's to pinhole that right now, it just seems unnecessary and detrimental. And I know that it's really about who would be repurposing it. The connection has been made between repurposing and closing, and closing is also repurposing. It's just who's doing it. So I'm not sure that I want it to be narrowed down. And I know that in our last meeting, we came up with questions that we were going to direct Patrick to come up with, and I'm not sure if that's what we were doing right now at this meeting. If there's time, obviously more information is better. But one thing that I haven't said yet is just thank you to Patrick for attending different meetings, like the one in New Haven the other night, and for all of your effort. This is a lot of unsure happening, and I know we all want to plan and we want to know what's going to happen, but I realize that the administration and our teachers and everybody else responsible for educating our children is also hanging on that cliff. And they are going to be responsible of doing the very best they can with whatever our community decides. And that's just such a task to take on. And I know the intentions are in the right place, and I know we'll do the best that you can. And just thank you for that, regardless of how this process goes.
Thank you, Liz. Rob.
Yeah, I guess I go back to what Krista said, that I think the meeting on the 20th, I would, it'd be really helpful for me, at least, I don't know, Patrick, if you could come up with this or working with Dawn. But I don't even know what day it is today, let alone you throw in a year on top of then what a fiscal year is. I get confused sometimes, and it'd be great to see like what's a most advantageous timeline in regards to thinking about making a decision, and if that decision were then need to go to the voters, and then the amount of time we'd need to warn that vote, to respect those folks that might end up losing their jobs also. So I guess thinking strategically around fiscal years and stuff like that, I have no idea. And so maybe on the 20th, if you could put together what you think the best practice timeline would be for the board, thinking about the next steps, I would really appreciate that. That would really help me see some clarity moving forward and provide us that sort of maybe endpoint, like this is actually, here's the line because X, Y, and Z.
So I think if oh, go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, I think so that's really what drove the timeline that we're working with right now, was try and get ahead of that FY23 cliff. And so we can extend, and there are options that maybe still keep us doing something ahead of that FY23, or we could extend beyond a point where we're really talking about FY24. So we can try to take another look at that timeline and kind of let you know where's the FY23 to FY24 kind of breaking point, which I think is important to consider as you're thinking about timeline. But I also come back to a question that was raised earlier, which is, until we know really what level of detail the board needs on any aspect of any option, it's hard to know what timeline is reasonable, right? So if the board wanted to know all the details of exactly what these innovation centers are going to look like, it will take months. And Krista cited the strategic plan process, which took 3 years to develop exactly what that looks like in a collaborative manner. And if that's what the board wants for information, then that's fine, but we need to allow time for the collection of that level of information. So in a way, for me, I think to be thinking about what's the information that is needed helps establish the time it's going to take to provide that level of information, which helps inform what the timeline is. So, and I think there's an opportunity probably on the 20th to talk about that as we consider ways forward.
Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, because we asked Patrick for so much additional information we wanted for the 20th, for us to have him present that to us. And it sounds like then we would decide at that point, if we're not going to make a decision on his proposal, that at that point we could then determine what further information we needed, if any, and then set a window, an end date at that point.
Right. So I think if we just have a motion to reconsider the time frame period for the decision making at the 20th meeting, then we can work on the 20th meeting, knowing we waited for the agenda to hear what the results of today's meeting were. So I think if we just table the time frame and decision making until the 20th and take action, then I think we can have Steve.
So I just wanted to address the question Rob threw out earlier this week about whether we wanted to flip the dates between the 21st and the 20th just because of the inauguration, and just to resolve whether we wanted to make that move.
The concern I have is we have Sue McCormick lined up currently, as I understand, for the 20th. Is that correct, Krista?
Yes, although, we could, discuss whether that's appropriate. I think the original idea was that she would join us to help us facilitate our deliberation. But if we are not making a decision on that date, then that might not be necessary.
Okay. All right. Okay. Is there a problem that we've been putting out the information on the 20th? Is the facilities discussion, and the 21st is the budget. Patrick, as far as your gathering of information for both of those nights, because you're working on both those nights.
Yeah, I think in terms of gathering the information, honestly, the difficult thing has been collecting, because there was quite a lot of information requested on the 22nd. We've gathered a lot of it thus far, and we have a lot of work left to do. So I don't know that we're going to be able to have, as thorough a response to all of the questions that surfaced as we wish we could on the 20th. One more day does give us one more day. How much more that allows us to achieve is hard to know. But I think there hasn't been an officially warned meeting yet. So I think in terms of, being on the up and up with our community, I don't think there's a significant impact there.
So just for
It
clarification,
may just be that we've been talking about the 20th so long that you're throwing people a curveball when it's not that date. That's my only concern.
so is it the 20th and the 21st are the dates? Not the 22nd. I just heard the 22nd and then got nervous that I had missed something.
20th and the 21st are right. And for what it's worth, we're going to also need to, in one of those meetings, talk about our voting process in light of what's forthcoming in the legislature that Caleb referenced earlier. We're going to have some decisions to make about how we want to move forward, which make more sense with the budget conversation, given that it's at least in part about a budget vote and when and how and all of that.
Okay, Sarah.
I'm just curious. We originally needed a separate meeting to do it as, I don't know, to deliberate some giant decision. And if we're not deliberating a giant decision, might we maybe just put them both on the same night on the 21st, or is it too late to do that? And do the budget first and then just have a discussion, but like really frame it and not knowing we're not like gathering information, and I don't know. It's just a thought.
Liz, you had your hand up.
I feel that the budget presentation from this year and from previous years is part of the decision. Like, it's step one in the rest of the information. It exposes so much of the staffing cuts that have been happening. So I think it's directly related in so many ways. And I wish everybody would see both, I guess.
Okay, Dave, thank you. Dave Sharp.
Um,
Oh, you're muted, Dave.
You stole all my reports from the state association doings and reporting from the legislature. And it's been alluded to a couple of times, H48, that allows towns and school districts to change the date of the meeting, the annual meeting, and authorize mailing ballots to every voter. There's going to set aside $2 million of remaining COVID federal funds to pay for mailing the ballots to all citizens, should that be the choice. I think it's in our best interest, since there's 5 voting entities on town meeting besides the school district, to take a lead on this. And I would suggest that we either stick with traditional town meeting day, or decide soon, maybe the 20th of January, what date we prefer other than traditional town meeting day. And both before and after that decision, that Patrick or Dawn speak with the authorities in the 5 towns. I think it would be really messy if the 5 towns all decided to have different days for voting, and then we were going to try to have yet another different day, or have a day where all 5 towns are going to vote on the school budget. It would be in our best interest to have all 5 towns conduct their meeting on the same day, regardless of what day that is.
Kevin?
It's just a little nit, but I looked at the budget presentation, if I understand what it is, and I didn't see the usual chart that showed student populations and all that all those metrics. Is there an intention to include that this year?
I hadn't been building the presentation to include that, but we can easily include that information if that's useful. Mostly because the narrative around enrollment has been playing out in the other longer range conversations around budget. So I tried to keep the other FY22 budget information more concise and kind of sticking to the numbers, but we can definitely expand and include more of the enrollment figures.
Well, plus we're given a reprieve on this budget anyway, so that number doesn't necessarily connect directly.
Rob?
To Steve's point, I originally made that request to change the date from of the two meetings, the budget meeting to be on the 20th, and then the larger facilities use to be on the 21st, just in light of I think more of the emotion behind the longer term conversation being. I think we put that on a calendar. I think maybe at the end of one of the meetings way back. I don't really remember when, but it wasn't on purpose, and I don't think people had their calendars out saying, "Oh, that's inauguration day." Definitely didn't have the crystal ball out, knowing that January 2021 would have started like January 2021 inside the Beltway. So knowing that we've pushed out a timeline, I don't know how I feel on that original request. That's just where I fall at the moment tonight. But so that's my thought. Thanks, Steve, for bringing that back.
I do have concerns about trying to consolidate the two meetings into one, because we need the time for discussion amongst about the information, about the survey. I mean, we'll probably still look at that on that day. So I really feel like we need to keep it separate, because it would allow more time for us to have a discussion than if we do the budget and it goes longer and then the discussion gets shorter. And I really think we should keep them as two dates.
I agree.
As do I.
Okay. All right. So let's keep them as we have scheduled at this point, and the facilities meeting will allow us more time for discussion as we hear what information Patrick has gathered. And then we can talk about a time frame or a time period maybe to put on that, and the survey information. And as Patrick said, the voting piece. So that I think like it's stacking up to be a pretty full night anyway. So, okay, well, we'll just keep it as it is and go from there. Okay. All right. All right. So we have had, our public has hung with us, and I do have Paul Ferlenza. He sent a message to me. Oops, 1 minute, Krista.
I don't think I get to talk to that last thing.
Oh, I'm
that we
sorry.
talked about. So I just wanted to make sure that we know it's not good to have votes in the summer. And also to make sure that on the meeting on the 20th, I had asked, but I wanted to make sure it was remembered to have a motion for the study committee with Virgins on the 20th, or to have a action item about that on the 20th.
Yep.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I missed you.
Dawn? I'm sorry. It's Chris.
Oh, okay. I was like, who's talking to me?
Sorry. Do you, there was all discussion, there was no actual motion to table that item? Do you need to do that or not?
Does somebody feel inclined to make that motion? Just to table it to the December or January 20th meeting?
I moved to
I'll
table.
move.
It looks like Dave Sharp and Sarah McLean.
Yep, I'll second.
Okay. And we've already sort of had the discussion. So all those in favor of reconsidering the time frame period and for decision making on the January 20th meeting, please say aye, and I'll go down the list. Krista.
Aye. Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
Okay, Kristen.
Aye.
Okay, Rob.
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Kevin.
Yes.
Steve.
Aye.
Caleb.
Yes.
Okay, Andrew.
Yes.
Okay, Liz.
Aye.
Okay, Sarah.
Yes.
Okay, and Annie.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that's everyone's in favor. So we'll take it up on the 20th. Okay, now moving on to public comment. Thank you for waiting, Mr. Forlenza.
Thank you. As one individual in one town, I really appreciate that you're considering taking more time to give this consideration. Just a couple of points. The first is that we did submit a 10-page memo, and since we only submitted it this afternoon, I appreciate that many of you did not have time to read it. I'm simply going to paraphrase it in about 1 or 2 sentences, which is basically, we believe repurposing is closure, and that closure requires individual towns to vote. In the memo, you'll see reference to case law, to laws itself, and an emphasis on common reading of what the charter agreement was. If you want to explore that more, our attorney is happy to make himself available at another time, you may want to take us up on that.
Paul, can you just pause for a second and just like introduce yourself and say which body you're representing and talking about the memo?
Perfect point, Sarah. I've done that many times. My name is Paul Forlenza. I'm on the Lincoln Select Board, and we did hire the firm out of Montpelier. Its name is Tarrant, Gillis, Richardson, and Sheems. And we would be happy, as I said, to make him available if you like. The Select Board in Lincoln is working with several different groups who are pretty serious about trying to come up with an alternative. And I appreciate the comment that several of you made, which is, if you vote against, what are you really voting for? And we take that pretty seriously, that we need to come to the table with a proposal. Now, it's not going to be a complete proposal. It's probably going to be a skeleton proposal, depending on how much time we have. But we have some interesting people working on it. We have 2 retired superintendents. We've got somebody who's understands school financing, who's on the board of a private school. And as Dave Sharp referred to, we do have an individual who's consulted to several schools in Vermont and also across the country. So we'd like to make that offer. Just as an indication of how serious folks in Lincoln are taking this, is the Select Board has sponsored 2 different Zoom meetings this month. And at both meetings, we've had over 80 people. So I'm sure you've heard from many of those. I apologize if some of that has sounded confrontational. Most of us do want to work with you in a collaborative way. Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you. And the document Paul was referencing was sent to me this afternoon, and I shared it with all board members. So you should have a copy in your inbox, and it will be attached to the meeting minutes of tonight's meeting. Herb, I see your hand up, but Mike Fisher spoke at the beginning of the meeting, and I want to give him an opportunity to go ahead, and then I'll take you next, Herb.
Thank you, Dawn. Mike Fisher, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I want to start by just saying thank you for your hard work tonight, all of you, and everyone watching too.
And just take a moment to recognize the tremendous, and recognize and appreciate the tremendous work that goes on in our schools every day. And particularly on these days, I don't know if you can, the metaphor of having the rug pulled out from under you works multiple times, because it's kind of been pulled out for you once. How can you pull it out again? But a pandemic, violent incursion into the Congress, into the Capitol building, you know, that affects all of us. But there's additional pressures on school employees, including vaccine policy, the growing numbers here in Addison County and around the state. And then on top of that, concerns about the retirement fund. There's a lot of pressures on school communities right now. And despite that, it's not perfect, but school employees and school communities come together every day and do the very best they can. And I just think it deserves, while we're talking about all these big issues, it deserves us to take a moment and appreciate their work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Herb, you'll be next. And Sally, I see you after Herb.
Sorry about that. I had to get back on the video. Thanks very much. A very, very interesting discussion tonight. I appreciate many of the perspectives, even if I don't agree with them or they don't agree with me. I really appreciate. I think it was a very, very thoughtful meeting. I'm obviously happy that you're going to take a little bit of time. I have there's a lot of things to consider with the time that you are giving yourselves with. I have one very specific suggestion for how to make good use of that time, and that is to try to construct a real robust financial model that is sourced from data that is publicly accessible, starting out with, where we at the status quo, if we want to avoid the thresholds, and then go down through the options, using different assumptions. Certainly the district's proposal that's on the table now should be included in that, but also other options that the board might want to throw in the mix there. And I think if you have that kind of a robust financial model, it'll go a long way towards not satisfying, making people comfortable that the financial issues are transparent, available, accessible. And then you can go on to the real important issues of, well, so, if you have one or two options that you think are financially feasible, well, what's the best option for the kids? But before you get there, I would hope that you would try to build a real good financial model that allows you to, make different assumptions and play out, different options. I think that would go a long way towards maintaining, the trust that I think you folks need to have with the community and vice versa. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Herb. And Sally Burrell.
Hi, I really appreciated this meeting. It was so good to hear everyone talking about all the things that have come up and the ideas of planning more and taking time and all that. I really appreciated Chris's idea of bringing more diverse voices in and really doing a process so that more voices and expertise could come into it, and maybe more creativity in some areas. And one of the things I'm thinking of is, like, I was so excited to hear about the innovative classroom or the innovative spaces that Patrick brought up originally. And the way they showed how that different kind of education, newer education, is what we need these days and what's more relevant, and really, gives kids more personal instruction. The thing is, I think that's what we need for all education now. I feel like this is such a ripe time for just really looking at our education and trying to give that to everyone, not try to just have it aside and go back to a regular education. I just think it's a time that maybe that could come into the conversation, so that that kind of maybe progression of education can happen now, because we're in a different world right now and kids learn differently. And it's just such a time for especially around competition and, teaching to the test and all that. I mean, hopefully that whole thing is going out the window with our new administration as far as that competitive type of education. So I think it's a time to think about that as well as facilities. And one more thing is, I know that Mount Abe lost getting a bond 3 times in a row. What are the chances of whatever needs renovation there happening again? And what's that going to cost? And how does that fit into the whole facilities plan? Just, I'm not asking that for now. I'm just saying, I've been thinking about that and wondering how that fits in. That's all. Thanks. Thanks so much for what you're all doing. Oh my God. Amazing work.
Thank you, Sally. Okay. All right, we're going to end that with Sally's comment, and we have one more meeting evaluation. Chris, any chance you have that up and run us through it?
I tried it and it tells me I've already completed the survey.
Oh, you have that too, Sarah?
That's the best thing about the meeting right there.
That's what happens to me.
That's
Russia. All I can say is Russia. They did it. You better check it out.
If you are all fine with it, we can skip it this meeting. Is that all right with everybody? Or do you feel the need to document the success?
I think you were engaged.
All right. Okay.
You did an excellent job.
All right. A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Steve Rooney and Andrew.
I second.
Andrew seconded it. So all those in favor of adjourning at 8:32, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Don.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you all. See you next week.
Thank you.